Yo, what's going on? Chavo Guerrero Jr. here, giving a big shout out to Wrestling Rehab. Keep watching, keep listening, and viva la raza.
Órale. Órale, Cholo, Trucker Wrestling Rehab. Shouts to all the junkies out there, man. Hopefully, everybody's doing good. And when I was a kid, I did have a favorite wrestler. A lot of pain, a lot of energy. But man, we're gonna get into all that. First, let me go ahead and bring in one of my homies, man. One of my buddies. He is a boxing channel. If you guys want to hear some unbiased, well articulate, educated boxing, you guys go check out my man G Funky Boxing. Get him in here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk some pro wrestling. I love pro wrestling, man.
Yeah, man. It's so refreshing to talk some wrestling, man. It really is, especially the old school wrestling. But
yes, sir.
and if we're gonna talk old school wrestling, I mean, we gotta bring in the man, just a plethora of just wrestling. Let's go ahead and welcome back to Wrestling Rehab, my buddy one, Mr. Bill Anderson.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
How you
Good,
doing,
good.
sir? So
I'm doing good today. How are you guys?
Doing great.
yeah, it doesn't matter how bad it was for me. It's about to get better because this conversation is really gonna put me up there. I'm gonna, as soon as we're done with this conversation, I think I'm gonna go run around and look for some ropes to start shaking or something.
Oh, very good.
What's up, Ruben Sanchez? All right, so I mean, I guess we'll start from the beginning. Mr. Anderson, you've trained quite a few wrestlers, and there's a lot to be said when it comes to the Ultimate Warrior. As a matter of fact, I'm guilty of it. I said it, later on in my life. When I was a little kid, I was just like, "Hey, that's the coolest guy ever." Later on in my life, I said it. I'm like, the guy can't wrestle. He was a good character, but he can't wrestle. But you're here to set us straight, sir. So when did you come in contact with him? When did you first see him? Did you hear of him from any other school? How was it for you? Because you were out here in the Southwest.
Yeah, let me tell you right from the get-go how this began. Uh, Unfortunately, I was going through a divorce in 1985. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm at now, and I was going through a divorce, and I decided to move back to Southern California, which is my home away from home. I've always loved LA. I spent a lot of years wrestling there, the old Olympic Auditorium, my home. And my good buddy Red Bastien, who was a road agent with the World Wrestling Federation at the time, had contacted me because he knew I was coming back to LA. And he said, "Bill, I need some help. I'm going to open up a wrestling school." And he says, "I've got some really big guys." I was, oh my gosh, I was like 33 years old, I think, at that point. I was really healthy, pretty in good, very good shape. And, and he says, "I need help in the ring." He says, "I can't get in and train. I got the name value of Red Bastien. He was a world renowned wrestler. But he says, I can't get in the ring and train anymore because I got artificial hips, bad knees." He was, worn out 10 times more than I am. Red really paid his dues. And so Red says, "I need a favor." He says, "I'll give you a place to live in Southern California. You come back and you live with me rent free." And he says, "All I need is for you to train in the ring with my boys." And he says, "That'll help me out tremendously." And I would do anything for Red. Red was like my father figure. So I said, "Red, you got a deal." So I went down. Well, what he did was Red rented out a racquetball court in Northridge. It was an old a Nautilus Aerobics Plus gym. They don't have those anymore, I don't think. This was 1985, summer of 85. Let's say August 85. And so we're talking 38 and a half years ago. And Red rented out a racquetball court. He had a ring made from Iron Mike Sharp, senior, not junior, the guy with the
Yeah.
wristband. It was Mike Sharp's junior's father, the old man, and he had been a big time wrestler in the 50s and 40s. And Mike lived in LA and made wrestling rings, so he made Red a ring. We picked up the ring at Mike's house and drove it to this racquetball court and set it up. And Red says, I'm going to run this wrestling school. And he says, I don't even want to call it a school. It's more like a camp, like a summer camp type thing. And he says, I'm going to run this 6 days a week for 5 hours a day. It's an intense training. It's not going to be your prolonged. Like I ended up running my school was 2.5 hour sessions 3 times a week. I took my time because I had other things going on. I had a lot of wrestling in my life going on at the time. So I had to pick and choose, when I was running my school, when I was even there to help with the school, and versus when I'm wrestling in Mexico and other places, because I was very active. So Red had me meet these guys. We all met one night. There were 6 guys came down, and they were a guy named Dave Sheldon, who was 6'7", who eventually became the Angel of Death in world-class wrestling and in WCW. He worked. There was another guy named Mark Miller, bodybuilder. Another guy named Garland Donahoe. He was a bodybuilder from I believe it was the Marine Corps. And then there was a guy named Steve DeSalvo, who ended up wrestling as Strangler Steve DeSalvo in Calgary and in Puerto Rico. Pretty big, muscular guy. Then there was 2 more guys named Steve Borden, who became Sting, obviously, and James Hellwig, who became the Ultimate Warrior, or eventually Warrior. So none of them had any wrestling experience previous to this. None of them had been to any wrestling schools. Their first contact was Red Bastien. And I understand why they went to Red. Red was, like I say, a top-notch wrestler in every federation he had worked for from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and into the 70s. Red was a top wrestler, so they went to him and for training. So that's the background of these 6 guys, where they came from. They weren't trained somewhere else and then came to Red. They weren't already on the circuit wrestling or anything else. They were newbies, just breaking in. And, they were still guys trying to come up with names for themselves and gimmicks, and they didn't know what they were going to do. In fact, I have a picture here. I don't know if you guys can see this. Whoop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. There's me.
Okay.
There's Red Bastien, if I'm pointing over here.
Okay.
And here's the guys, Mark Miller, the Angel of Death, who stands a little taller. Next to him is Steve Borden, Sting. Next to him in the yellow is Steve DeSalvo. And then turning his head is the Ultimate Warrior, Jim. And then the final guy at the very end over there is Mark Miller. This is only one of 2 pictures I took during the whole training of these guys before they ever broke into the business.
Wow.
So it's kind of it's always been a keepsake and a cool thing for me, because, it's like, I knew you win, when you guys were nothing but bodybuilders and gym rats, and everything. So anyway, that's where the basis of this training school came in with Red. So we offered them 6-day-a-week classes. And it was intense. It was intense on me, because these guys, I couldn't even trust them to take bumps with each other so much. I had to be the guinea pig to make sure they understood what it felt like on the receiving end and the giving end of a worker giving them a bump and telling them what to do and showing them the feel of the body, of how it feels when you're body slammed, how you should feel going up and coming down on a body slam, and all the moves, drop kicks, flying head scissors. It doesn't matter, arm bars, arm locks, top wrist locks, all the moves, headlocks, throwing off to the ropes, coming off in shoulder blocks, everything. They had to understand the feel of a real wrestler taking the bump as well as them taking it. So I ended up taking things times 6 with these big guys. And I was the smallest guy in there. Weight wise, I was about 220 then. Boy, I wish I was 220 now. I was 220 then, and these guys were all 240 to, well, Angel of Death, Dave was probably about 350. He was, 6'7". He was a huge man. He was a huge man. He was built, kind of like Kane, and it's not quite as muscular as Kane, but that big of a man. So I had to take all the bumps. And Red was very happy for that because he didn't have to do anything. Red would get in the ring and push off like we used to call the referee's position. You hook up and you push and push and push and push. And Red would do that with the guys, but he couldn't fall down and take bumps because of his hips. So these guys had very intense training. And when I wasn't there, the nights, again, in 85, I was still very active wrestling. There was maybe one night a week I told Red, hey, Red, this Friday I can't be there. I've got to wrestle in Tijuana, or I'm wrestling a WWF show in the LA Sports Arena or something like that. I said, I can't be there. Red would bring in Professor Toru Tanaka, Mondo Guerrero, or the Golden Greek John Tolis. They were all friends of Red's. He would bring one of them in and what he called his guest trainer for the night. And so they would get a different perspective of working out with guys of various lengths of duration in the business and gimmicks and everything. And so that's what we did. That was the proposed idea for 6 weeks starting at the end of August. It was like, it was closer probably right September 1st, or let's just say. Well, what ended up happening through all of this training, I'm kind of cutting a little bit out here, but through all this training, Garland, Donahoe, Mark Miller, Jim Hellwig, and Steve had a sponsor. They had a man paying for their training with Red. They had a guy that paid $10,000 for their training, and I saw the check. He gave Red $10,000 for their training, and his hope was to bring these 4 guys in eventually as Power Team USA and take them around the country and tour all the circuits and make it big. But in 1985, the problem is this country in wrestling had barely started doing 3-man teams, and the Freebirds were just coming into their own at that time. And most circuits couldn't bring in 4 guys at one time. That's a big chunk. If 4 guys come in, 4 guys are laid off somewhere else. So if you're going to Don Owen, who's gonna go in Portland, Oregon, and tell the 4 guys, okay, you 4 are no longer employed here, and so that's a big undertaking. No pun on the Undertaker. It's a big undertaking to do. So at about the 6 week, it was getting close to the end of training. Jim Hellwig called me one night from the house that he was renting with Sting. They were living together, and the other 2 guys were all living in the same house in Reseda, I believe. And Jim called. He says, "Bill, can I meet you? Me and Steve, just me and Steve and you meet at Gold's Gym in Venice." And I said, "Sure." I said, "What's going on, Jim?" He says, "Well, I don't want to talk too much about it now. I want to talk in person. I didn't want to talk in front of Red at the school or anything else at the gymnasium there." So he says, "Meet us like tomorrow morning, like 9:00 at Gold's." I said, "Okay." So I went to Gold's Gym. This is like maybe mid-October of 85. Went to Gold's Gym, and Jim and Steve were sitting out front at their car, and they were waiting for me. When I got there, and they says, "Bill, we have an idea," and they says, "We need some advice, and we don't want advice for anybody that has a financial stake in us. You have no stake in our careers whatsoever," because I wasn't being paid for their training or anything. I was doing this as a favor to my friend Red, and I would have done it for 50 years for that man. I owed him a lot. Red was a great man to me. So it was not a big thing to me in its own way that I was helping him get in the ring with these guys every night of the week, basically, and bust my butt. So Jim says, we don't want to stick around for this 4-man team idea. That's not going to work. We've asked around at some promotions around the country, and it's not feasible that promoters are, like I had just said, they're not going to bring in 4 guys to take over like 4 baby faces, and then you start eliminating people. And who's going to be eliminated? You're going to go to, Jerry Lawler's promotion and start eliminating 4 top guys, until Bill Dundee doesn't have a job anymore. You can't do that. So they figured it out that they together, Sting and Warrior, were going to form a 2-man team, which was far more reasonable to go across country and wrestle for various groups. Because you got to remember, this is still in the territory days, basically. Vince took over the country in '83, but there were still many promotions, Bill Watts for Mid-South, Don Owen, Eddie Graham, I think in Florida. There was many promotions that had regional groups going. The Sheik in Detroit had a promotion, and I think Roy Shire was still running in San Francisco. So they had opportunities. And of course, Stu Hart in Calgary. So they said they had sent out pictures as a 2-man team to various promoters, and they had a couple of options. And one option was going to Calgary for Stu Hart. They asked me my opinion. I said, well, Stu Hart's legendary, first of all. All the big names in the business have gone through Calgary at one point or another. So you can do that. That's an idea. I said, what else you guys got on the burner? And they says, well, we sent out pictures to Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett in Tennessee circuit, and they're interested in us. And I said, okay, now that's real interesting, because I said, look, I worked there in 1975 when I was an 18-year-old punk kid in my rookie year. I worked in Tennessee, and you work Indiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, there's like 8 states you work in that circuit. You work 7 days a week, 3 times on Saturdays. It's that busy of a circuit. I said, that's a great place to go and get experience, which is what they need. In-ring experience in front of a crowd, not in a training school where you got blank walls around you. You need the crowd element. So I says, Tennessee is a very wise move if you go that way. And I said, if you go to Calgary, it's cold. You're going right now at the beginning of winter. You're going to be driving in 6 feet of snow 7 days a week, and you'll be getting experience, but you're going to freeze your ass off. Let's face it. No other way to say it.
Yeah.
And it's good experience. I'm not knocking Hearts up there. I mean, by any means. That'll toughen you up real quick for the business, is working in Calgary. So I said, what else do you guys got? They said, our only other option is having Red book us, but Red wants 15% of what we're going to make for the next 10 years. And they said, so those are our 3 options, unless you tell us something different. Or we're asking you, like I told you guys, we're asking you, me, because I have no stake in them. I have no financial gain. I'm not going to, I get money off of this guy. I get money. I get anything. It was like we were friends, because I'd hang out with these guys even on off time. I would go over to their house and we'd sit and watch TV together and stuff like that. They were my friends. So they says, what do you advise? They says, okay, my advice is go to Tennessee. I said, call Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler and tell them you want to come in, and you want to gain your experience in Tennessee. It's the wisest thing you could do. So that is what they did. And it pissed a lot of people off. I don't think Red was that happy. And even though I've told you, I love Red, and Red was my friend. I was giving these guys straight, honest advice, not not some money. Money didn't have anything to do with this. I was giving them advice what I would do if I was in their shoes. I would
Right.
go to Tennessee and wrestle because I'd been there and done it, and I saw the experience it gave me working with Jackie Fargo and the Mongolian Stomper and Bill Dundee and all these great talented wrestlers down there. Tommy Rich, I was wrestling several times down there. So I said, it's good experience, go for it. So that's what they ended up doing, and they became, I guess, Rock and Blade or some crap, the Blade Runners or
Yeah,
Yeah.
that let me
And-
let me get
Go ahead.
let me get G Funky up in here. G, you're pretty familiar with the territories and all
Yeah.
that. I'm not that familiar with it. When did you first see these guys come across? I remember hearing that they were a tag team, but I personally never actually saw it. When did they come across your feed?
Oh, for me, yeah, I discovered the territories through a program that used to come on a channel here where I live in Northern California in Sacramento. And we didn't get a whole lot of the territories. It wasn't until my dad, who was a big pro wrestling fan, he would watch this show called Pro Wrestling This Week, which was sometimes hosted by Gordon Soley and I think Bill Apner, who was the editor of the magazine Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Excuse me. And yeah, they would cover everything. And I remember because at that time in the 80s, it was basically just WWF and then NWA was what we really got most of the time. Sometimes we got the UWF, which was syndicated in our area, and World
and that was
Class.
a hot show.
Yeah.
That was, to me, honestly, that was the best wrestling in the country in '85 and '86.
Mhm.
Bill Watts's promotion was red hot.
Yeah, it was great. A lot of big stars were there. And then that was when I kind of discovered how things kind of worked, was because I would see them on these different territories. And then a year or so later, I would see a guy like a Hacksaw Jim. Well, he wasn't Hacksaw then, but he was just Jim Duggan. Then they turned him into Hacksaw Jim Duggan once he went to WWF. And I do remember seeing tag teams like, and in the Blade Runners too. You know, it was
Right.
it was a fun time, really was.
It was for me, and I was an active wrestler during that time, so I wasn't watching as much TV as I would have liked. 'Cause I was busy, but I agree. The mid '80s was red hot, man. It was a great time for wrestling.
Okay, so now, Mr. Anderson, so how is it? So they're over
Okay.
there in Tennessee, and how
Right.
is it that they start becoming, the face painted Sting and Ultimate
Well,
Warrior?
They were trying to be something different. I mean, they already had great physiques, which not a lot of wrestlers had in '85. There were the Road Warriors. There were Lord Humongous down in Continental Wrestling. There was big, huge guys, but
I
they were
think-
few and far between.
Yeah, I think
they-
guys were big but not ripped the way.
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
he-
Oh yeah, because honestly, in wrestling, wrestling and steroids hadn't really mixed at that point, like it became. When eventually, in WWF, you started seeing Roddy Piper with the veins hanging out
Yeah.
and everything, because everybody was doing it back in those days. Warrior and Sting, they started at Gold's Gym working out. They were getting into the process. They were hanging out with Schwarzenegger and all these other bodybuilders that were going into Gold's Gym, and they knew all too well about steroids. So they thought, okay, let's be something different, because obviously, if you go in looking like everybody else in every territory, you're never really going to make it. That's why there was a Hacksaw Jim Duggan or a Junkyard Dog. Because Junkyard Dog could have just as easily become another SD Jones. You gotta differentiate yourself there. You got to do something. Ted DiBiase was a hell of a wrestler, but you make him the $1 Million Man, and all of a sudden he stands up 20 feet above. Kurt Hennig had been a mid-card wrestler for many years because he was a hell of a wrestler. But give him the Mr. Perfect gimmick, something he could work with in his mind, and Vince, as talented as he was at creating the guys, made him just above and beyond, a superstar.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way it was with all those guys, you know. Um, some of the gimmicks I thought were stupid, obviously, and we'll get back to Warrior. I'm just going off on a little tangent.
Yeah.
You know, the Red Rooster and some of
Oh,
the
boy.
stupid names. Terry Taylor is a perfect example. Terry Taylor was a hell of a
Good
wrestler,
wrestler. Yes.
a very good wrestler. Vince, in his mind, saw nothing in Terry Taylor. So he became the Red Rooster to give him a gimmick. Well, it was a stupid gimmick, obviously.
I heard that, and I heard this on Bruce Pritchard's podcast, which is on YouTube as well, where they said they turned him into the Red Rooster because he was such a cocky guy in real life, in that they wanted him to
I've
be the
known
cock
Terry
of the
for-
walk, you know.
I've known Terry for many years, and I could see that. I could understand that, and I would believe that. No offense to Terry, because I always liked him. I've known Terry for a long time. We did some church events together, and through the years in the early 2000s, and so I know Terry outside of wrestling too.
Yeah,
But it is what it is, and he is a cocky guy. But you know, so
That's
but
great.
getting back to Warrior, I don't want to go through all the places Warrior wrestled because it becomes well known. You know, he eventually he went to Dallas, and Sting went to work for Bill Watts.
Yeah.
And they tried to be, I guess, a team, like you said, for Bill Watts. But Warrior didn't gel too well with guys like Dick Slater and some of the real tough guys out of that promotion, because they were old school there. You know, they had their own way of looking at things. So they didn't need some fresh bodybuilder to come in and start dominating the main events, you know. Warrior made it big in Dallas as the Dingo Warrior, only because he became very good friends with the Von Erichs, and they didn't feel so threatened with him. Kerry Von Erich was his best friend, so they tolerated him there until Vince picked him up. But getting to what you guys really want to know is, could Warrior wrestle? First of all, there's many different answers to this. The main answer is he didn't need to wrestle. The bottom line is he did not need to even know how to wrestle with the way the promotion gave him the gimmick for Vince. The Ultimate Warrior was not a wrestler. He didn't need to wrestle. All he needed to do was have the rippling muscles, striations in him, cut to the bone, run down the ring, and no matter how blown up he was, run the ropes, clothesline off the ropes, do a big slam, and pin somebody. That's what Vince expected of him, and that's all that was expected of him. That's the basics. I mean, sure, different matches went longer and there was different things planned. And of course, if he could power press you, then so much the better. But the bottom line is, he wasn't designed to be Ric Flair or Harley Race or whoever.
Right.
First of all, you guys think back. How many times did you see the Road Warriors put on a lot of holds?
Not
They
often.
did. They had a simple gimmick. Who badmouthed the Road Warriors? They were tough guys. And rest in peace. They're all gone now. Road Warriors are all gone.
Yeah.
All friends. You know, they're all great guys. And but the Road Warriors didn't put out in the ring like, oh, headlock takedowns and all this other stuff like a Terry Taylor, for instance. Because nobody told them to do it, and they weren't going to do anything more than what their gimmick allowed for them to do. It was basically shoulder tackles, clotheslines, elbows,
Slams. Yeah.
slams,
Well, let me
occasional suplex.
ask you this, Mr. Anderson. What was James? Was he cool with it? Was he okay with this gimmick? Did he like it? I mean, it looked like it became part of him after.
Oh, yeah. He was fine with it.
Did he ever
He was
complain
fine with it because you got to remember, the bottom line is he was making big bucks. He was not he had no long life wrestling love, like all of us here. He was not a fan. I have been a fan before I became a wrestler. So when I met wrestlers and worked with them in the ring, especially in Mexico, because I used to buy all the Lucha Libre, Boxy Lucha, KO, all these different arena magazines from Mexico when I was in high school. So when I got to work with El Rayo de Jalisco and all these stars in Mexico, oh my God, I was in awe of them. Can you imagine being a young actor and your first movie, you're sitting side by side with Brad Pitt, and you wanted to be an actor all your life, and you working with Brad Pitt, right, sitting right next to you eating lunch. That's how it was for me when I went to Mexico to work with these top stars. Well, this is what Warrior was not. Warrior was not a fan. He was a businessman.
Yeah.
He wanted to make money. And that's all he wanted to do. It was a business to him. And that's no slight to him. He's not the only one. I don't think Goldberg would ever be accused that he's another one.
Yeah.
What's his repertoire of holds?
Right.
Besides getting down in a scrimmage position, I mean, he's got less holds than Warrior even did. Although I don't think Warrior could do that finishing move as well as he did.
Yeah.
But I don't know that Warrior ended too many guys' career like Goldberg did with Bret Hart.
Oh,
So, the thing is, Warrior put butts in seats is the bottom line in wrestling.
Yes.
It's what Hogan did. It's what a lot of them did. Some had to work at it a lot different to put butts in seats. Ric Flair had to do 60-minute matches. So did Harley Race. So did Dory and Terry Funk. There's a lot of guys that had to bust their ass to make it in this business. But that's their gimmick. That's their style. How many wrestling moves did Kamala do?
yeah.
I mean, it's just, that's the gimmick. That's the gimmick. You're not booing him out of the arena. You're just like, oh, another guy, he's got a different, unusual gimmick, or King Kong Bundy, all these guys. I was around them all. I did shows with every single one of these guys, in the ring with them all, wrestling them or ring announcing or refereeing with them for years. Every one of these guys.
That's an important thing that you hit, Bill. I want to just add something real quickly, because I remember in watching wrestling as a kid, Warrior was the guy. I actually turned from being a Hulkamaniac to being a Warrior fan, at one point. But as I got older, and I remember now WWE at the time, now, but at the time it was still WWF. They came out with a movie or a documentary about the Warrior, and they just dragged him. They don't have it anymore. But one thing I remember watching that is, like you said, they all said, yeah, he was this, that, but he didn't love the business. He wasn't like like you said, a fan of the business. He just wanted to make money. Almost every guy that complained about his work said that. And I was like, yeah, that's true.
Well, that was,
I believe it was in 2006. They made that DVD to just pretty much bash the heck out of Warrior.
Yeah, that's because he had sued Vince, and Vince had to get back at him. And the only way you really get back at Warrior is to mess with his ego. So to badmouth him and have all the guys do that. They could do that with anybody. They could show bad matches. They could talk crap about anybody when they first began, or as they were going along with their ego, or stupid things they did on the road, or whatever. Look, Warrior had a huge ego. Some of it was justifiable. Some of it maybe wasn't. But I can tell you this much, as one of his trainers, as the guy that was in the ring with him all those times for many weeks, through the end of his life, he treated me with nothing but respect. And I saw him in Vegas, or I see him at TV tapings in Des Moines, Iowa, or in Omaha, Nebraska in the early 90s. He was nothing but friendly, cordial, and give me a hug. Even I flew in and did TV tapings in Omaha and Des Moines in 90. And the first thing he saw me in the dressing room, he says, "Billy, what are you doing here?" And he said, "You live in California still?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "But they flew me in for tapings for 2 nights." He says, "Did you rent a car?" And I go, "No, I just took a taxi from the airport right to the arena." He says, "Well, how are you getting to Des Moines or Omaha tomorrow night?" He said, I don't have a ride. I said, I don't know. He said, well, you're riding with me and Jimmy Powers. And so, that's what Jim was to me. A very stand-up guy. Never an ego. When I was at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, I don't know what year, maybe 1990, and Jim was the WWF champion. I had taken up about 12 guys for TV tapings again, and we did Oakland and San Francisco back-to-back nights. And a couple of my guys were real marks in the dressing room. I mean, they were like, oh, my God, that's a warrior over there. But they were students of mine, and they said, Bill, can you talk to him and see if he'll take a picture with us? And I go, yeah, it's not a problem, man. So I went in. Jim had his own dressing room. I went in. I said, Jim, a couple of my guys want to get pictures. Do you mind? He says, no, bring them in. And he put the belt on every one of their shoulders and posed for pictures. No ego whatsoever. He was thankful, very, very, very friendly with the guys. Nothing like, hey, man, I'm the champ. Get out of here. None of that crap. He wasn't acting like Mr. T in Rocky 3, or,
Get out my face, chump.
Yeah. Hey, chump. Hey, woman.
Mr. Anderson, going back to the school, did anything stand out with him and Sting where you're just like, okay, these guys, you know what? I think
it did with Sting. I don't think Warrior stood out as an exceptional athlete.
Okay.
He did well. He was as good as Mark Miller and Garland Donahoe and DeSalvo. He did as well as those guys. Nothing stood out. Now with Steve, on the other hand, I knew right away that he had a leaping ability to leave his feet. That was like, he could have been a pro basketball player. The guy was an athlete. I mean, true blue athlete, man. I knew right away his athleticism was different than Warrior's. So it didn't surprise me how Steve elevated himself through the years and did his running, that finish like running into the corner with the big jump and things like that didn't shock me at all. And it really didn't shock me with Warrior either because he was a little more stiffer movement-wise, not as fluid as Steve. So it didn't surprise me that he became a clothesline kind of guy. But that's not a knock on him because that's just exactly what Vince wanted to create. Create a monster that was different in the ring. If a promotion is 16 guys going into the ring, 8 matches of 2 guys, and they all do Ric Flair moves, oh my God, you're going to be bored to death at the end of the night. You got to have your Big John Studs. How many moves did Big John Studd do?
Right. Yeah.
You got to have guys that are different, unique characters, face paint, whatever the gimmick is. Who else in 1985, 86, 87, 88, and 89 was sprinting to the ring like Warrior? Not too many guys.
No.
Most guys, like me, were walking slowly to pace their endurance for the match they had ahead because I knew I had to go 15, 20 minutes, and I didn't want to overextend myself just on the entrance. But Warrior didn't have to think like that. Vince gave him his own gimmick. So, that's something to take into mind here. And the other thing is, not only did Vince create it, but it became successful. Look at the houses Warrior drew with everybody. I mean, with all the top guys that he worked with, Orndorff, Honky Tonk Man. Yeah, Ravishing Rick Rude, all the guys. He drew big houses because they put him in with heels that people wanted to see get beaten, and they wanted to see the character of the Warrior come down the aisle to the ring. So it was a success, and Warrior made money. He made Vince a lot of money, and Vince made him a lot of money too. That's kind of like my main feeling about when people knock the Warrior. It's like, well, if you're going to knock him, you might as well just start going down the list of Goldberg. You could even include Hogan and everybody else in. But did they draw money on top of their gimmick? Yeah, most of them did.
Mhm.
Drew big houses.
Well, let me ask G here. G, you and I were kids, man, and Hogan, he had all these little Hulkamaniacs. I was one. What made you switch to Warrior? Because I did, man. I was just like, you know what, Warrior's my guy. I still like Hogan, but I'm because we're leading up to WrestleMania 6, man.
I really can't put my finger on one particular thing. I think it was just like Bill saying, the whole package was just something new and something just exciting, to see
Right.
a big, huge guy like the Warrior with the face paint and the hair and the strings around the biceps and
Yeah.
and the tassels on the boots, and
Right.
every time you see him,
And
he
that
looked
entrance
different.
music.
Yeah,
That
entrance music
music,
was phenomenal. Yeah.
Mm.
It just-
it was red hot.
Yeah, it just, I don't know what it was. Maybe because Hogan was, for years he was the guy. Maybe there was something inside of me. I was like, kind of tired of it, And I was Team Warrior WrestleMania 6 too. Yeah.
Right.
I want to
Well,
I definitely
I
want
do want to say, I was a Hulkamaniac when I was even working for the promotion, and let me tell you, there was nothing like Hulk Hogan. I mean, as a ring announcer or as a wrestler in the dressing room or anything, when I heard Hogan's music kick in, and he came down the aisle with his own style of energy, pointing at the crowd and pointing at the ring and all, he was phenomenal. There was something about that man. And boy, let me tell you, Vern Gagne is rolling in his grave because he missed it. He didn't have the creativity to understand what was possible. And just like WCW and Eric Bischoff didn't understand what was possible with Steve Austin and Mick Foley, what he could do with those characters, those guys, and the talent that was hidden in them. Look at that. You cut Steve Austin's hair off and you had a whole new man there.
Yeah.
Give him some breaking glass music and you've created a $1 billion industry.
Right.
Look at that. It's amazing. It's amazing. And Mick Foley's bizarre characters that are in his brain of becoming Mankind and Dude Love and all this stuff. You let him run loose and look what he was capable of. And so these other promoters missed the boat where Vince didn't. And Pat Patterson is part of that creative group with Vince at the time that helped create these characters and give them points like, Vince, let this guy do this on top of this, and you're going to see the crowd reaction. You're going to watch it and see what he does, how the crowd reacts. And that's how they developed all of these guys, Bundy and all that. Bundy wrestled with hair for a long time. One Man Gang, he had nothing like that kind of well, he did. He was One Man Gang in Bill Watts' territory, but years before, he had long hair that would have done nothing for Vince. If Vince would have said, grow your hair out and everything. No, man, they let him keep that mohawk. And man, when he came in, he was red hot as a badass from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
You just had to have the right gimmick and the right people creating the gimmick for you.
I want to ask you this, since you brought up the One Man Gang, and he did have a great gimmick when he came from the UWF to the WWF. What on earth were they thinking turning him into Hakeem, the African Dream?
That goes right.
Go out there, he danced a little bit. I mean, come on, man.
Hey, I'm surprised Vince didn't team him up with the Red Rooster. Let me tell you, that was stupid.
That would have been great, man. We're one of their shirts right now as tag team champions.
I don't know. Let me tell you, One Man Gang is a very good friend of mine. He's a prison guard down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in real life. He's long out of the business. He does some autograph things, I guess, every now and then. Fantastic family man, great guy. I went on a tour overseas with him to Korea, Japan, Okinawa, Guam. We spent 30 days together, rooming together, and he's just a fantastic guy. I've always liked him. He's very easygoing, just a down south Southern boy with great manners, and he was raised right despite that gimmick he had. Great guy.
Yeah,
but you think of all the guys with gimmicks back in those days, and Vince gave them those gimmicks for a reason to differentiate themselves from everybody else. You know, let me give you another example. The Rougeau brothers, Raymond Rougeau,
Oh, yeah.
Ray was a hell of a wrestler in his own right long before he teamed up with his brother. He came from a wrestling family. His dad, Jacques Rougeau Sr., was a wrestler, and his uncle, Johnny Rougeau, were wrestlers in Canada and Quebec. And I saw them wrestle in Detroit with Ray Rougeau when Ray was like 18 years old. Because I'm from Detroit, and I used to go watch matches at Cobo Arena when I was a kid. So Ray Rougeau is the nicest, calmest guy on the earth. So what does Vince do? He gives him the cocky French gimmick of being arrogant and mean to people and just a rotten guy. And it's the farthest thing from Ray Rougeau. Now, Jock is a great wrestler. Jock's a little cocky, but he could back it up too. Jock was a great guy too. I wrestled them guys a couple of times. Great talent, but that's what he put arrogant Frenchmen in and changed them from nice guys to arrogant guys. So, you know, everybody has to have a gimmick. You know, that's the oldest saying in wrestling. You got to have a gimmick.
Yeah, his really stood out. I mean, for dang sure it stood out. I mean, you had Hulkamania that was running wild, and Hogan at that time, he really pandered to kids. You know, take your vitamins, say your prayers, listen to your kids, and you know, I'm your superhero and everything. Here comes James Ellsworth with this just crazy maniac kind of look. His hair is just all tossed up, paint face down, and kids gravitated to it.
Exactly. Well, and you got to remember too, Warrior's motto was always believe. Believe in yourself. He was trying to give them good traits as kids to grow up. Boy, you guys know, nowadays we could sure use somebody telling kids to take your vitamins and stay out of the gangs and do this, do that, do this, do that, and stay away from police stations and everything else, the way society has turned. Right. But they were trying in their own way, and people eventually condemned Hogan for taking steroids, yet telling people to take their vitamins. I'm not part of that group because I look at what people are going to, I looked at the good he was doing, not anything internally bad that he was doing to himself. His long-term drug use with needles or pills, things like that, was his business. What he was outwardly saying to people was take your vitamins, stay in school, get along with your parents, do what they tell you, go to, don't leave school, do this, do that. All very wise things. And I believed in that. But, I just think Hogan was an incredible human being. I mean, I'm telling you, when I introduced him in the ring when I was ring announcing, I had goosebumps from the tip of my toes to the top of my head when I would say his name, and that music would kick in and he'd come down. It was just powerful. And I didn't get the same feeling when I introduced the Brooklyn Brawler. Let me tell you.
Come on, are you kidding me? The Brooklyn Brawler.
So the thing is, they knew how to work. They knew how to work their gimmick. Warrior didn't let Vince down with the way he acted and the way he went down to the ring and what he performed, because the road agents would have straightened it out right away. Whether it was Blackjack Lanza or Chief Jay Strongbow or Rene Goulet or Sergeant Slaughter, all the road agents, Tony Gurria, they would have given him pointers on how to change the gimmick to make the fans more receptive. They didn't need to. The fans were powerful. The fans responded.
Yeah, they definitely did. Let me ask you this, because G and I were kids, and WrestleMania 6 was coming along, and to me, it probably had the biggest buildup ever. Champion versus champion. Title for title, and two baby faces. And at that time in wrestling, you didn't see two baby faces get in the ring and square off against each other. This was huge.
Is that the one from the LA Sports Arena?
No,
this was in Toronto.
Toronto. Okay, I always get those two mixed up.
Yeah, Was there any I mean, fast forward, yes, but did they get along at all? Because the stories come out that Hogan and Warrior never really actually saw eye to eye.
Well, they might not have been friends, but they were business associates.
Mhm.
It's good business to do what you have to do in the ring. Very, very bad business to go off on your own direction in the ring and do a personal vendetta against somebody. Um, there was a lot of guys that wrestled people that didn't like each other. Um, and uh, business was business, and Hogan was a supreme businessman. At the end of the night, he wanted to make his big money, and so did Warrior. So the Honky Tonk Man hated Warrior, but they wrestled 1,000 times against each other. It's just what you had to do. It was business.
Yeah.
You don't look at. I mean, a bad example is Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart,
Oh,
and believe me, you guys know
Yeah.
they hated each other.
Yeah.
No respect whatsoever. But they went in and did what they had to do for many nights before Montreal and that sort of thing. So I don't remember the match with Warrior. That one at Toronto. I was at the LA Sports Arena for that WrestleMania. But I don't really remember that much. But I would know for a fact that they worked together in the ring, and they did
Yeah.
what they had to do for the sake of the business.
yes.
Yeah. And
He
it-
had quite a huge build-ups. That one with the Macho Man at SummerSlam. Gee, go for it, man.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say you brought up the champion versus champion, and at that time I had never seen something like that. We would me and my friends and my family members that would watch wrestling, like we would often talk about like, what if the Intercontinental champ took on the heavyweight champ, like, but we've never seen it. And then when they promoted it that way, oh boy, we were all pumped up. And funny how, Bill, you brought up Goldberg as kind of someone who's kind of similar to the Warrior. I mean, that's the way that they did it with him too, with Hogan. He was the United States champ. Hogan was the heavyweight champ, and he beats Hogan kind of like the way that the Warrior did. That's kind of weird how it circled back
Right.
around after all those years.
Right. Well, something to keep in mind too. During the 80s and 90s, WWE, or it was F before, whenever they changed it to E, they were running like 3 shows a night across the country. They had like an A show, a B show, and a C show. C show might be at some high school, and you might have as a main event Tito Santana versus Dino Bravo. And then your next show up, you might have had the Honky Tonk Man against Randy Savage. And then the next show could have been Warrior against somebody. Could have been Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, or Hogan versus Rick Rude, or something like that. So you had 3 different draws, to whatever level of attendance you were looking for. So when you put all the champions on one show, obviously the other shows are going to suffer. Now at WrestleMania, there weren't other shows operating. I'm using this as a bad example, but you don't put all your champions on the same show normally. That's why you won't see like so many title versus title, title versus title. You like to have them staggered on other shows, so it gives that show importance, and people have a reason to want to come because they're like, oh, Rick Rude's defending the Intercontinental belt tonight against so and so at the arena, at the auditorium, and I want to go see that. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, Warrior is against Paul Orndorff in the main event or something. Sometimes that was a consideration in that. And obviously for a big show, like as a blow off, like they would do like WrestleMania, with title versus title, because it was everything just maybe leading up to that with interviews and things being said along the way of people saying, oh my God, this guy's really bad mouthing this guy. Let's see if they back it up in the ring with this guy at the next WrestleMania or SummerSlam or whatever.
No, I'm telling everybody right now, if you did not witness it, the build up to WrestleMania 6, I mean, they used Saturday night's main event. Saturday night's main event was the thing, man.
I loved it.
Oh yeah, the build up to this match. I don't think there's been a build up like that. There's been some really, really good build ups ever since then. Don't get me wrong, but at that time it was kind of, like in boxing, it's like, hey, the world stopped, right, for this match. In wrestling, I believe, at least for me, I was just like, I don't think the build up, I don't think anybody contest that buildup. It was huge. Champion versus champion, title for title, Earthquake. Oh, look, he's smashing on Hogan, and here comes Warrior to help him out. And now, there's a little bit miscommunication, and now Hogan and Warrior might go at it. And man, what a great time, man. What a great time. Gee,
well, that just shows how good they were at their characters.
Yes.
Because the fans could, if they were bad at it, the fans could have fell flat on their face and just stood there like, is that all you got?
Yeah.
But no, the fans responded, which is what their job was as wrestling fans. They responded because Warrior, Savage, Hogan, whoever it was, they're all that good and talented at
they were both over
projecting to the fans what they're looking for. We want you to respond. Piper was another one that knew how to do that. Great talent.
Was something else.
Roddy was a character, man.
Gee,
what's a real character.
What's some of your fondest memories of the Warrior?
Well, one in particular was, and you mentioned Saturday night's main event, which was just a fantastic show at the time. But I remember shortly after Warrior became the heavyweight champ there, they came to my city and he wrestled one of Mr. Fuji's secret weapons, as what they were calling it at the time. I think was the Super Ninja, and he just absolutely destroyed him. That was one of my favorite memories of the Warrior. And also his match with Savage at WrestleMania 7, which was basically a retirement match.
That was at the LA Sports Arena.
Yeah, and that
I know that because I carried Savage to the ring.
Oh, okay.
Him and Sherry. I carried him and Sherry.
Was that thing really heavy, or
was
God,
everybody
there? Oh,
yeah.
Even with all the big wrestlers around, it was still heavy, huh? Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
We got to do a whole new show for that, right there.
They hired like 8 of us, and I brought guys from my wrestling school down, and I put Louis Spicoli on one side. I put all the guys. Well, I put me on the side. I didn't want to be on the camera, so I put myself on the inside so that I wouldn't be as noticed, because I was not only the ring announcer normally there, but I just thought it was a little lower to put myself as a sedan carrier, but I got paid like $300 to carry him to the ring. So why not?
Yeah.
And plus I got pictures with Donald Trump backstage and not Tommy Gossard. That was WrestleMania 2. Donald Trump, Alex Trebek, Willie Nelson. I mean, all kinds of people were backstage, man. So I'm hanging out there talking to country music with Willie Nelson, and then I get paid to take Savage out to the ring. It's a good night. It was a good night.
That was a good match too for the Warrior. A lot of people always talk about how much of a bad worker that he was.
And again, it goes back to Savage being that good. Mm-hmm. Even if it's to carry him, whatever. Yeah. As a psychology of a heel, Randy was very experienced. Obviously, grew up in the business. He knew it since he was out of diapers. The business. So Randy, just like Ric Flair or Harley Race, could make a mop stick look good, out there on the floor, and they were just that talented. So any shortcomings Warrior had, Randy would pick it up and cover for it. And, and that's just the way it went. That's the way business was.
That's how a good worker works, because
you don't want to embarrass somebody out there in the ring and fall flat,
Yeah, I always give Bam Bam Bigelow a ton of credit for wrestling Lawrence Taylor that year that he wrestled in, because he made Taylor look like $1 million, and he's green as grass. He never wrestled.
What a shame that. I mean, and Bigelow was so talented.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
man, it's just all these guys are gone now. Man, it breaks my heart, because they were just such a part of the '80s and '90s. Man, all these guys, and I knew Bam Bam. I knew all of them. Davy
Yes,
Boy Smith and everything. We're all friends, man.
I
Rick
understand.
Rude was a friend. Dino Bravo.
Let me let me ask you this. As we're gonna start wrapping it up, did you keep in contact with him? He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. And I think it was just probably about 2, 3 days later is when he passed away. And he mentioned your name. He mentioned you when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, thanking you. Did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were you in contact with him? Did he
No,
seem healthy? Did he say anything about, hey, you know what? I'm having a little bit of medical issues.
no, no, no. Here's what I through the years I stayed in touch with him. I actually had a ring made for him. He had a wrestling school in Scottsdale in the '90s. Oh wait, no, not in the '90s, in the early 2000s. And he called me in 2001 maybe and asked me if I knew somebody that could make him a very good ring. And I said, yes, I know a guy in LA, a guy named Johnny Flores that used to make boxing rings and wrestling rings. And I said, Johnny can design a ring, whatever you want. So I had him make a ring for Warrior, and Johnny took it all the way to Scottsdale, Arizona, and set it up for him. And I had talked to Jim a couple of times through the years, and I hadn't heard from him in a few years when he did that Hall of Fame speech. And he mentions me and Red Bastien, and then it was just a couple days later he had his heart attack in the parking lot here in Scottsdale. But I didn't. When I looked at Jim, I could see his face looked really red. He didn't look healthy to me. He looked big and he looked good in some respects. But when I see somebody with too much of a redness in their face, I instantly think of high blood pressure. I instantly do. And I just thought, man, he looks bad. And I had lunch with superstar Billy Graham here in town that weekend, and I told Billy, and Billy had said, "I saw Warrior, man. He doesn't look good, man. He doesn't look good." And then it was just a couple days later he died.
Mm.
I think he was 54 years old, something like that.
54.
Man, that stunk. That really affected me for a long time, man, because like I told you, Warrior always treated me so good through the years. Yeah, it just, I miss the guy. I miss his friendship and the respect he showed me. And it was very, very, very sad moments when he passed.
It was. And for myself, because again, growing up in the 80s and the 90s and watching the shows and being a Warrior fan, we obviously, when the internet became what it is, we heard a lot of stuff, shoot interviews, a lot of things came out. We all talked like, hey man, he'll probably never be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But when he actually did that year, we were all excited. I remember me and my coworkers that, we were like, hey man, look at that. The Warrior, he came back and inducted him. And then like a couple days later, we seen the news that he passed away. We were just like, wow, this is
Well,
wow.
yeah.
Man.
Thank God Vince and Jim were men enough to put the past behind them.
Yep.
And shake hands and hug it out and do what they felt they needed to do for the sake of the business and for their own mental easiness and relax over the past and get past any hard feelings. It's just it was just the saddest thing, that Jim is gone. And you know what? I just speaking of Warrior, I just found out where he's buried. It was kind of kept hush hush for a long time. If you looked at, I'm a big grave hunter. Is the reason I talk about this. I've been to all the celebrity graves all over the country. I go to a lot of wrestling and celebrity graves, and I always looked up Jim Hellwig, Ultimate Warrior, whatever, to find out where he was buried. And it wasn't until recently that another YouTube guy went, and I think he's buried in now I can't remember, Indiana, Ohio. If you look at Ultimate Warrior, or I think if you just look up Ultimate Warrior, find a grave, it'll show his grave. But he has a headstone that says on there Jim Warrior or something like that, James Warrior. And but it was really a hush hush thing about where he was buried, and for a long time. And I haven't been to his grave, but I will go whenever I possibly can make it back to the Midwest.
You let me know, Mr. Anderson. We'll plan that road trip.
And that would be cool. That'd be cool. It'd be a great event.
I have one more question I want to ask you, Bill, since you were involved with the WWF and Warriors career, and things are just popping into my head now that we're talking. I still have this in my VHS collection because I used to record wrestling programs too. But I remember this one Superstars when they were starting an angle with the Undertaker, and the Warrior was on the funeral parlor show talking with Paul Bearer, and from behind the Warrior attacks him, and they put him in the coffin, lock him in the coffin. And he's in there for at least 10 minutes. And, the guys are coming out from the back. They're trying to open it up, and they can't open it. And then they finally open it. You can see him. He's trying to tear through, and he's just laying there. And they perform CPR on him. But I want to ask you, how did they do that? Obviously, it wasn't real. We know that. But how did they pull that off to make it look real to the fans like me at the time?
Well, I think as long as the guy was willing to go into the casket, some people aren't that interested in going in because, first of all, they know that's where they're going to end up down the road. And some are just superstitious about doing things like that. I think it just, you owe it to all the road agents of giving advice to Warrior and to Taker to let them know the reactions that should be expected from them. And I'm sure Pat Patterson was a big part of that whole gimmick because there was nobody more creative than Pat Patterson in the WWF. He guided a lot of careers, and his wisdom was there for the booking and everything. So I'm sure, they probably ran through it in a rehearsal too, to make sure that, they did, because they had to make sure that Jim wouldn't freak out. I mean, legit freak out being in a casket, because like I said, some people are legit superstitious. And once that thing closes, there's always that feeling of what if they can't open it, even though as silly as that sounds.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Get a drill and, you start sawing holes in it and everything, So, you can imagine it'd be like a horror movie,
I remember they were drilling little holes in there, and then the commentary's like,
we're coming to save you. He's been in there for 35 days,
Oh, man.
We're putting turkey chicken through the holes so you can eat. And
I mean, look, they had him throwing up because Papa Shango, put a spell on him one time and stuff. So,
well, that's great. That's cool.
That's great memories. And
I don't remember that, honestly. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I could look it up online.
Yeah, I was legit freaked out when he put him in the coffin. Like,
that's funny.
I was like, wow, they're going to kill him, like.
Oh, man.
That is hilarious.
Good time. A lot of great memories. And, man, may he really rest in peace. Snap it to a slim.
Yeah, not only Warrior, like I said, all the boys from that time period that gave us all thrills and chills, man. From Rick Rude, Dino Bravo, all of them, the Road Warriors, and
Yeah, it was a different time. It was a time of characters. It was.
Yeah, it was. Kamala, one. One. I was going to say one man gang, but he's still alive. Thank God. And but all the other guys, the Andre the Giant and John Studd, just a super nice guy. Big John Tenta, the Earthquake, great. When you think of one, another one pops to mind, and another one pops to mind, and
the Shockmaster.
All the Von Erich boys, and so much great talent, man. Gentleman Chris Adams and Adrian Street we just lost, and Terry Funk, and
Terry Funk.
it goes on and on, man.
Yeah, I love pro wrestling so much. you know, as much as I love boxing, that's why I have a channel here on YouTube. And now I'm actually involved in the business of boxing and helping fighters get fights. But wrestling is by far my favorite pastime. I
That's
grew
cool.
up on it. I love it, man. I don't care.
Did you
My
used
wife
to
hates
go
it.
to Arco Arena?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
My parents went to the old auditorium, which was downtown before they built the Arco Arena, and watched wrestling there. But yes, I went to several of the events, several Raws, Nitros. I was at the Rumble in '93. That was in Arco Arena when
Yeah.
Giant Gonzalez made his debut, and he was in,
Good
that,
God,
in
man.
that weird costume they had him in.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
yeah.
I wrestled many shows at Arco Arena. I wrestled Tito Santana there. I wrestled Demolition. I can't even the Bushwhackers. I wrestled everybody there in that building at some point. But I was wearing a mask under a lot of those. On TV tapings, because I was a ring announcer in LA, they would put a mask on me for TV tapings as the White Shadow or the Black Knight. And they would cover my face. So the fans wouldn't see me and say, "Oh, that's the ring announcer," you know. So
well, I'll be looking for you now. Next time I turn on the Peacock, I'll be looking for you on there.
Yeah. We gotta go to the archives. Well,
yeah.
we can do this all night, but we'll go ahead and bring it to an end right here, man. G Funky, any last words, brother? You want to go ahead and just throw out there?
I just want to say thank you, man. This is a very pleasant surprise to have Bill come on with us and talk some pro wrestling and the Ultimate Warrior, again, one of the best characters of all time. You know,
Yeah.
I like I said, he made me jump ship from being a Hulkamaniac to
Wow.
being a little warrior, and that's how great he was at his character. And yeah, sad day when he passed away, but the impact that he had on the business of pro wrestling will never be forgotten, man. Rest in
That's
peace,
true.
Warrior. And thank you, Bill, for coming on. And thanks, Cholo, man. I appreciate this, man. This has been so much fun, man.
No, man. I appreciate
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And you know, I can only talk about old school stuff because I don't follow the business so much anymore. You know, I've met some of these guys that are working nowadays for like events, and I mean, I've met like Randy Orton only because I'm friends with his dad, Bob Orton, Cowboy, and I've met some of the guys, but I don't really know them all that well. Rey Mysterio Jr., I've known him since he was 15 years old, wrestling as El Calibre in Tijuana. You know, some guys I've known a long time, and you know, but I don't really follow it so much anymore. I'm too busy dealing with my aches and pains.
all good, Mr. Anderson. We'll definitely have you back on. G, you too, man. We gotta talk some more old school wrestling because I love it, man. But
Indeed.
You know what? RIP to one of the greatest characters ever. And just to echo what you said, G, yeah, definitely had an impact, man, in my life as a little kid. Warrior forever, man. Rest in peace, brother. Shout outs to all the junkies out there. Cholo Choker from my boy G Funky Boxing and one Mr. Bill Anderson. Catch you guys on next one.